PTF back with you. Special presentation of In the Money Media. Got a text today saying that Randy Moss from NBC's phenomenal horse racing coverage was willing to come on and reprise, I'm going to say, rather than present his argument of the conversation we've had many, many times over the years about the spacing of the Triple Crown. In light of recent events with this, we've had a lot of history this year. We've had some really fun history with a female trainer winning for the first time. How about this for a little history, recent history anyway? 0 runners from the Kentucky Derby quite possibly taking place in the Preakness. What does this tell you, Randy, about the Triple Crown spacing?
It's broken. The Triple Crown's is completely broken, and it's been this way for quite a while. I mean, we're now talking about 3 of the last 8 Kentucky Derby winners going on to run in the Preakness. I mean, and you could see that coming 20 years ago. The tide was beginning to turn. Trainers just hate running horses back in 2 weeks. Bill Mott's comment after the Kentucky Derby, the morning after the Kentucky Derby, when he was asked if he was going to run Chief Wallaby, if he might consider running Chief Wallaby back in the Preakness, his quote was, "Nobody thinks about the Preakness." I mean, what does that tell you about where we are right now? If Renegade had won the Derby, do you really think he would have run back in 2 weeks? If Commandment or Further Ado had won with Brad Cox, he didn't run back with Mandaloon. Bob Baffert would have run back. He doesn't seem to fall in that category of trainers that are absolutely dead set against it. But it's an anachronism, the 2 week turnaround, and I could go on and on and on and on and on about it. and I have gone on and on and on and on and on about it.
I think you're right about Cox. Mandaloon, of course, was an anomaly because of that weird year where he didn't get the race into the steward's room or whatever you want to call it later. But I think you're probably right about all the suppositions you just made. But I will say this, and there's no bigger fan of Bill Mott than me. And I love the fact that Bill Mott has resisted having any sort of media training. It's part of his charm. But the quote was churlish. And I didn't appreciate it as a big fan of Maryland racing and the Preakness. And there's the point to be made that Nick Tamaro made on Twitter and this is part of the conversation here, that the wagering public is trained to bet on Preakness Day. Now, I'm not saying there's necessarily a magic to it being 2 weeks after the Derby, but any event that attracts that much wagering attention for horsemen, I would like them at some point to at least think about the gambler a little bit since we pay the bill. Fair.
Look, I think it's, the way I look at it, if the Preakness were 4, especially 5 weeks after the Kentucky Derby, Mott would be running in it on a regular basis. Sovereignty would have run back in it. He has a problem. He says nobody thinks about the Preakness, nobody being the vast majority of trainers, I think, who would have run their horses in the Kentucky Derby, just because of the 2 week turnaround. And he's pretty brutally honest about it. And maybe brutal honesty is what it takes right now to get this thing rectified.
Let's go to the obvious counterexample and what somebody would say probably to these trainers, certainly to guys like us who've been making this argument about changing it. They would say, what about last year? But for the birth of sovereignty, we would have had a Triple Crown winner last year in the form of journalism. He was none the worse to wear. Why is there such an obsession with this idea that these horses can't do this? Shouldn't, given the importance historically of the Triple Crown, the fact that it's a smashing success from a business perspective, as Stephen Christ has said, the one thing from a marketing point of view, maybe outside the Breeders' Cup that really, really works for the sport, why change it when it's so obvious that the modern thoroughbred can still do it, as proven as recently as last year?
Well, what's one thing that really, really works for the sport?
The Triple Crown.
That's poppycock, right? That's just complete BS. Of course, the Triple Crown works for the sport, but what has made the Triple Crown the success that it is the best horses of the generation running in the Kentucky Derby and then the Preakness, and then most of them running back in the Belmont. That's what has captured the public's imagination in the Triple Crown for decades and decades. The rematches. Imagine what we would have gotten if Affirmed and Aladar were running in the Kentucky Derby today. You think Aladar would have run back in the Preakness? Hell no. And imagine what it would have been last year with Sovereignty and Journalism being rematched in the Preakness. Imagine what it would be this year with Golden Tempo and Renegade, with the Ortiz brothers rematched against each other in the Preakness. Oh. That's the sort of thing that has made the Triple Crown what it is. And that's the sort of thing that's now vanished just because some people are either A, so obsessed with tradition, or B, so beholden to New York that they can't see the truth in front of their face, or more likely, they choose to ignore it. And it has to be rectified. It has to be fixed.
Mentioning New York is interesting because I go right to real world solutions. And I think in the real world, the kind of solution that probably could happen would be stretching it out over, I don't know, I'll be optimistic and say 8 weeks. Do we think that type of spacing, 3 weeks in between races, approximately, maybe one of the gaps gets a 4-week break in there. Do we think that would change the minds of the Brad Coxes, the Todd Pletchers? Because if not, if they stretch it out and it's still the same Michigas that it is now, that makes me think, well, then why risk the tradition? Why risk the fact that the betting public is trained to bet on these days? What do you think about that idea? Do you think that would be enough? And do you think that kind of consensus? I mean, could there be a college of Chad Brown and Brad Cox and Todd Pletcher sitting down with New York and Kentucky and trying to hash this out in a way that works for everybody and the sport?
3 weeks? 3 weeks would move the needle about this much.
That's the problem.
It's a problem. It's not a problem. It's a reality.
Right.
You know, I mean, you look at the problem and you fix it. That's what every other sport would do. That's what other sports have done. You see a problem. Okay, how can we fix this? Easy. It's simple. It's not complicated. The horse trainers do not want to run back in 2 weeks for a variety of reasons. And really, I mean, the primary reason is that they think it is counterproductive to the best physical interests of the horses. And how can you argue with that? All horses are capable of running back in 2. Sure they are. But is it good for the horses? Is it? The trainers think not. Right? Now, and so now, look, Martin Panza, the New York Racing Association, has done an unbelievable job at crafting a Belmont Stakes undercard that is, in my opinion, the best day of racing in America, best weekend of racing in America, other than the Breeders' Cup. It's unbelievable. And right now, the Belmont Stakes is benefiting from the current spacing of the Triple Crown and the current reluctance of the horses to run back, trainers to run back in less than 5 weeks. Because, hey, guess what? The Belmont Stakes is 5 weeks after the Kentucky Derby. So they get all the top Derby horses. They get the Kentucky Derby winner. They get the Derby runner-up and the Derby third-place finisher and sometimes the Derby fourth-place finisher because it fits perfectly the 5 weeks. That's why New York, and I understand that it's why New York is reluctant to change it because they would have to completely blow up this stakes schedule and it would probably still be fine. But would it be as phenomenally successful as it is now? Possibly not. But look, I compare this. I've used this analogy before, but maybe not with you. With the NFL. Going back to, I think it was in the 1930s. And the NFL was in trouble simply because there were haves and have-nots in the NFL. Okay? The haves were the New York Giants, the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, and the Washington Redskins. The Philadelphia Eagles and the other teams in the NFL were suffering mightily and were on the verge of bankruptcy because there was no draft. The haves that had all the money would sign all the best players coming out of college, and the rest of the NFL teams would be fighting for scraps. So Bert Bell of the Philadelphia Eagles proposed, let's have a draft so that every team has an equal opportunity to sign the best players, to get the best players out of college. Okay. And those 4 teams that were controlling the NFL, especially the New York Giants, it was not in their best interests. Their best interest was the status quo. They were killing it. They were getting all the best players. They were a huge box office, but they prioritized the future success of the NFL over their own personal team success, right?
Yes.
They looked at the league as a whole, what would benefit the league as a whole, not just our little provincial area. And they agreed on the NFL draft. And the rest is history. The NFL began to skyrocket, and it obviously it still is the way it is. And that, to me, that's leadership. And that's what the New York Racing Association needs to do.
The analogy is clear. Yeah, the analogy is very clear.
That's, I mean, it's the Triple Crown. I agree that the Triple Crown is by far the best property in thoroughbred racing, and it's in intensive care. It is not doing well. The Kentucky Derby is doing great. But because the Preakness has become such a weak link, and it was an integral part of the Triple Crown, obviously, it's pretty clear what needs to be done.
You've alluded to that twice without spelling it out. I've got to ask you, what is the solution?
More spacing.
Well, do you have a specific idea in mind?
I mean, people have thrown out the first Saturday in May, the first Saturday in June, the 4th of July, which could definitely be workable. It's a good place to start.
I have some ideas.
Okay, go ahead.
But
go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
I'll take analogies to Bert Bell any day, by the way. I mean, what a story that is. That's for another podcast. When we do our NFL history podcast, Randy, we'll really go down that rabbit hole. But there's a big issue that it makes me crazy. And I'm in the midst of an exchange with the great Graham Motion on Twitter, who appears to be on the other side of this one than me. I've asked him to follow up and get some clarity on it. Everybody says, and I want to tear out what little is left of my hair when they do, it's supposed to be hard. To me, I mean, thank you. That is what I feel every time I hear it. To me, what you're describing, facing the best 3-year-olds twice instead of once, makes it harder, not easier. What can you steel man the argument from the other side for me? Because I don't get it, man.
I don't get it either. What about making the Preakness tougher to win makes the Triple Crown easier to sweep?
Right.
Now, I know, okay, so people are saying, and I get it, that horses will do better, imagine that, with enough recuperative time between races. Okay? Now, what's the problem with that? I have no idea. But, I mean, we're all about looking after the best interest of the horse here, and that's priority number one. But okay, so horses do better, and horses, let's just say that horses would be more likely to run their races there with a 4 to 5 week gap in between the races. Okay, that's fine. Now, but the Preakness is going to be tougher, so that would counterbalance it right there. It doesn't make the Triple Crown easier to win. It could very well make the Triple Crown tougher to sweep. But the goal is not to make the Triple Crown easier or make the Triple Crown tougher. The goal is to make the Triple Crown, again, the series that pits the best of the best 3-year-olds in a series of 3 races and captures the imagination of the public. And God knows horse racing needs that right now.
Now we're going to go down the rabbit hole as we approach the idea of a solution. am I correct, and I think I am, that television rights actually are part of the impediment, but also maybe could be part of the solution? I'm sure as a TV guy, you have thought of it through this lens.
I mean, I know all about the negotiations for the Preakness TV rights, which come up after this particular Preakness. Fox is making a huge bid. Fox slash Naira is making a huge bid, and they have publicly tied the their the possibility of Naira shifting the date of the Belmont Stakes to whether or not Fox gets the TV contract. Okay, I mean, that's business. It's hard. It's hardcore business, but it's business. But then Naira comes out and says, "Okay, we'd be willing to move the Preakness Stakes to 3 weeks after the Kentucky Derby." Well, that's again,
It's not
that's
enough,
not
right?
that's not going to move the needle. That's not
Right.
going to move the needle. Do you think that the New York Racing Association would in any way accept spacing where there is 4 to 5 weeks between the Preakness and the Derby and the Preakness, and 3 weeks from the Preakness to the Belmont? Of course not. Of course not. They would be vehemently opposed to that. They would want more than 3 weeks in that scenario.
This is where my idea is coming in, but I have one other down the rabbit hole TV question for you, and I hate to ask you something that I'm so clueless about, but Churchill acquiring the IP rights to the Preakness, does that have anything to do with the TV potential future, or is that just a completely separate and different deal?
I can't really answer that.
Okay.
I don't know. But I do know this, that Churchill Downs purchased the intellectual property rights from First Racing for the Preakness Stakes for $85 million. And they did it because they think there is considerable growth potential in the Preakness. They think that the Preakness Stakes and the Preakness undercard has been underperforming relative to its potential, to its historic potential. Now, why would it be underperforming? It's only one reason. It's because it's 2 weeks after the Kentucky Derby. And the horses running in the Derby don't come back in the Preakness, and the horses in the undercard for the Kentucky Derby, those fabulous undercard, very minute percentage of those horses come back and run 2 weeks later. And if it was spaced out more, there would be a lot more synergy that Churchill Downs could create between the Derby undercard and the Kentucky Derby into the Preakness. That's where the growth potential comes in. And I can tell you, Churchill Downs is not in the business of investing $85 million and just sitting back and watching nothing happen. I mean, I think my opinion is Churchill, if this goes through, Churchill is going to be pretty aggressive in its opinions about the way the Triple Crown should be laid out on the calendar. They've been hands off so far, right? They've been taking the approach that, hey, you guys work it out. We don't have a dog in this hunt.
First Saturday in May, nobody's talking about moving us.
First Saturday in May, right? But now there's investment involved, and I think and I hope that changes the dynamic. Whoever winds up with the TV contract, whatever, this just needs to happen.
Here's my crazy idea. It's a marketing idea. It's a TV idea. Perhaps it would move the needle for Naira. Triple Crown is the Triple Crown. We're not talking about we're talking about spacing it out. We're not talking about replacing it. But what if there was a marketing opportunity to expand it? What if the Triple Crown became a Grand Slam like in other sports? And what if Naira then got to have, as their reward for playing ball and moving these races to more logical dates that you and I believe would ultimately be better, all of a sudden now they're hosting the 4th Slam, the Travers, also laid out on this calendar in such a way to let other great stakes races like, Monmouth's Haskell find a place, somewhere later. Maybe the Travers moves up in my crazy idea. Anyway, do you think maybe something radical like that's really not just trying to reconstruct what we have now, but think about this in a futuristic way, in a way to truly grow the game that, I get it. It sure seems like from what the story you told that Naira and I were good negotiators, right? And what's the first rule of negotiations? You don't give something unless you get something. What if this could be what they get essentially?
I don't know, Pete. I mean, when American Pharoah was running, it was already sort of unofficially referred to as the Grand Slam possibility when American Pharoah went into the Travers Stakes and was beaten by Keen Ice. I guess I'm kind of skeptical that it would ever be, sort of accepted as a replacement for the Triple Crown, the Grand Slam instead of the Triple Crown.
I don't really want it as a replacement. I want it just as sort of a marketing thing to, you see where I'm going with this? Like I'm trying to, and I'm brainstorming here. This could be the worst idea ever. Make sure you tell us in the comments, and I'm sure plenty of people will. Most people in the comments are going to say it has to be 5 weeks. What the magic of the 5 weeks? I don't understand. That's the part I really don't understand.
It's been 3 races. It's been 3 times, 3 races in 5 weeks since 1969. It hasn't always been that way before that, right? In the early this is how much times have changed, Pete. In the early 1960s, there were a couple of horses, including a horse that either won the Preakness or was second in the Preakness, who ran in the Kentucky Derby. 2 weeks later, they ran in the Preakness, and they had a race in between at Pimlico, the week of the Preakness. I think Greek Money was one of the horses that did that, and there was another horse as well in the early 60s. And that doesn't even count the innumerable horses that ran in a race between the Preakness and the Belmont. That happened all the time.
Yeah.
That was commonplace. And that's how much things have changed. It landed on 3 races in 5 weeks because it made sense given the dates at that time. And it was no problem. It was no problem. The trainers were fine with it. Trainers would run back in a week all the time. It was no big deal. It was not even thought of as being this, this holy sequence that it has to be 3 times in 5 weeks. It was all about the best horses running in all 3 races, and it happened back then with regularity. Okay, if the Triple Crown had been redesigned today and it was being created, do you think there's any chance that it would be made 3 races in 5 weeks? Of course not. Of course not.
This next
it drives me batshit crazy is what it drives me, Pete.
I drove him to curse, people. I'm very proud of myself.
It's so simple. It's so elementary. It's so obvious. And yet there are people out there that probably are against night baseball, that are against the 3-point line in basketball.
Don't get me started on the designated hitter.
Yeah, well, okay, all right. And it's these these people that were probably against the Breeders' Cup, right? And now they're saying, it doesn't matter, you can't change it. It's broken. If it's broken, you got to fix it. That's the number 1 rule in business, Pete. Don't let it get broken. Hopefully. But if you do let it get broken, damn, you got to fix it.
I've been gently disagreeing to try to get some of these good arguments, or what I see as the best arguments from the other side out there. But the thing
you just want to get me going. That's all you want to
do. And this next point needs to be discussed with some top trainers who are not scared to run them back. But when you see the numbers in a super trainer world, trainer world with so much of the power in so few barns, I feel like you need the buy-in of those super trainers. And as much as I respect, I'm going to say this as lovingly as I can, as horse players, we're a little arrogant. You got to be. If you're going to risk your money and go head to head, like, you've got to be confident you're right, or you don't last a second in this game betting horses. Having said that, do we really think we know so much more about these animals than these top trainers who have so much of the power in the equine sphere, who never all year run a horseback even one time in 2 weeks? I get it. We know it can happen. It can be fun. Michael McCarthy showed it last year. Bob Baffert's shown it time and time again. But when so much of the equine star population is concentrated amongst people who won't do it, isn't it time for the horse players to say, maybe these trainers who lay their hands on these beasts every day, or have top assistants who do, know better than us?
Oh, absolutely. And all the veterinary studies that have been done that show that horses need recuperative time in between races, and that, they pretty much come out and say that 2 weeks is not an optimum thing. But yeah, and you talk to the super trainers, and I've done it. I talk to them all the time. Uh, I think Bob Baffert, and Bob may even be changing his tune now, but I think Baffert is about the only one that was okay with the Preakness being 2 weeks after the Kentucky Derby. Even Wayne Lucas jumped to the other side before he died.
That's something.
I do. I mean,
I want to push back a little bit that it's a safety issue, though. I do think that, and I used to make that argument myself a billion years ago when I first took up this point of view in an editorial I wrote in the New York Times. I framed it as an equine welfare issue. I think that's hyperbolic, but I do think the idea that you're not going to get maybe the maximum performance out of the horse going forward is legit, but I don't think it's unsafe. And I do think that is a straw man argument that our side sometimes puts out in the world. Do you think that's hyperbolic, or do you think it's actually right?
I don't think it's a straw man argument. Okay. I don't. Look, the notion that horses can't run as well coming back in 2 weeks. I mean, we've seen it. We've certainly seen it happen. We've seen it play out on the racetrack. But the Derby winner has a pretty darn good record coming back in the Preakness over the years compared to other races. Okay. And horses can come back and run in 2 weeks. And it's the second leg of the Triple Crown. So why wouldn't Bill Mott want to sweep the Triple Crown with sovereignty? Why would Mott not want to go down in history as the trainer of a Triple Crown winner? Why would Godolphin not want to go down in history as the owner of a Triple Crown winner? Right? The Preakness is a big deal. The Triple Crown is a big deal. And yet trainers still are choosing more and more and more and more often. It's only going to get worse. They're still choosing not to go down that path. Now, why would that possibly be? Because they don't think that it's in the best physical interest of their horses. Simple. And like you just said, who knows more about what's in the best interest of their horses physically than the people that are hands-on with them every single day? And so that's why I think that it is a legitimate argument. It's really the only reason why we're seeing this, in my opinion.
It was only the safety part I was I think from a performance point of view, I think with the modern thoroughbred, I feel really good about making that argument, journalism notwithstanding, who I think was a bit of a freak. Clearly, a lot of horses thrive on their racing. But the way the breed is today and the way they're trained today, it seems pretty clear they don't believe they can get anywhere near their best, or they wouldn't all be skipping it. And then the numbers, and I'm going to publish a piece about this week that goes through the numbers of how many horses have run back just in the last couple of decades. I mean, it's the trend. It's not a trend. It's like an avalanche.
Right. Exactly right. And if you go back like I did, and you look at every Kentucky Derby and Preakness, and you look at the percentage of the top 4 finishers in the Kentucky Derby that run back 2 weeks later in the Preakness, the drop off is astounding.
It's even more. Yeah.
It's not just the winner.
Right.
It's the other horses behind that don't have a Triple Crown at stake. Oh man, they avoid the Preakness like the plague compared to what it used to be.
Address journalism head on for me. Just a freak?
Clearly. Clearly. I mean, he ran in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. If you want an interesting and eye-opening statistic, go back and look at, over the last 20 years or so, the performance of horses in the Belmont Stakes that ran in the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, or even just the Preakness, and then come back 3 weeks later to run a 1.5 miles in the Belmont. It's unbelievable how poorly they run compared to their finish in the Preakness.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is great. My notebook's empty. You have anything else you want to get off your chest?
Other than this? Yeah.
Randy Moss, you're the best. Thank you so much for coming on here. We'll talk about a really competitive Preakness next week. I mean, that's the good news. That's the good news. It's going to be a great betting race. You guys' coverage is going to be spectacular. It's for me, a down the rabbit hole racing guy, hey, I'm super excited, but this is something, for the future of the sport we have to talk about. And I wanted to give you a chance, and we'll, I'll bring on somebody like Paul Matisse is probably the guy who I'll have come on at this point and talk about, how he sees it. I know he doesn't see it like us, and we'll get him. I want to give some equal time here. I don't want this to just be me getting my ideas enforced by you, but really appreciate you coming on here today, and we'll check in next week.
All right, Pete. Take care.